Da, da, da. That's up there. Oh, what's that? I'm sorry. The mini project? I think the mini project for this week, it's just a mock-up of like the YouTube homepage. Uh-huh. Oh, no, yeah, just pictures. Yeah, you don't have to do video. Yeah, I think the video we barely even really. Well, the video you'd have to like upload it somewhere and host it. Yeah, it could just be pictures. Yeah, don't worry about uploading a video or anything like that because hosting videos is very complicated. It takes a lot of work to host video up. But just thumbnail pictures is fine for it. In a grid layout. Uh-huh. Yep. Yep. Okay. So for today, I was just going to talk about JavaScript. I think the prior professor had this as like an off week, but I figured I'd use this time to just go over. I feel like a web class is not complete without talking about JavaScript. So I think this would be a perfect time to talk about it. And then when we get into actual UX stuff, I think it's either next week or the following week. We can then use what we talked about with JavaScript to do some of the what do you call it? To use some of the widgets in the frameworks we had talked about, like the Bootstrap framework, Foundation framework, etc. Has anybody ever used JavaScript before, or any type of loosely typed programming language, like Python or Java? But Java is a strongly typed language. This is going to be. It'll seem a little quirky when you work if you work with it. So Java, right? Everything when you declare in Java, you have to say what the type is, right? So like if you say integer, it's something like int I equals 2 or something, right? Semicolon, right? In JavaScript, in a loosely typed language like JavaScript, PHP, Python, everything's like it's just this variable. Usually it'd be like just a container, and you just put whatever you want in the container, and you really don't know what the type is until like you go to like either you have to like know it as your code flows through, like what you had set inside of the variable. But that's I think one of the confusing things people have sometimes when going from something like Java to like JavaScript, even though they share like a similar name, they're pretty different in terms of how they work. So I have a bunch of slides here today. So JS, how is JS different from HTML? HTML tells your browser how a web page is going to look, while JavaScript is interpreted by your browser and essentially runs code in your web page to do all sorts of different things and interactions and whatnot. So JavaScript, usually you use it for something simple like creating a pop-up box when a user clicks on something. Two, you can create full-fledged games with it, like the Flappy Bird game, I think is a popular one. And now they make 3D games within the browser. So just like in just regular programming, you have statements. So JavaScript is odd where you can, so usually each statement will end with a semicolon. So this statement here, it'll read line by line, or it'll read by semicolon. So you can say console.log hello, semicolon, and then it'll execute that line of code in the browser. You can also not include the semicolon, and this will still work, which is, it allows you to write some really sloppy-looking code, but it's just the way it is. So it's good because for beginners, it's really easy to work with because you don't have to worry about like syntax type of errors where you're not, including the semicolon at the end of a line, or even with the type, what we'll see in a minute when we go to like comparison statements. When you actually go to compare things like, say, like a variable I that's set to an integer, and you compare it to a string, it'll actually do what's called a type conversion at runtime and convert them into like objects and do the comparison, which is really neat. So statements, so you go line by line or go by semicolon. So semicolon is used to set up line blocks of code. So you can think of JavaScript statement as a sentence and a semicolon as a period. You also have JavaScript comments. So I think we had talked about this. I don't know if we talked about this in another class. You can do either single line comments by doing the 2 slashes, or you can do multi-line comments with the /*, kind of like, it's almost like C syntax, or I think even Java does this. In Java, it has the same commenting syntax, so it's the same exact syntax here for commenting. You can do the /* or the //. So /* will do multi-line, and // will do single line. Am I going to fit? Oh, go ahead. You should be able to. So in CodePen, let's go to that now. Oh, me. I have to get out of full screen view. I think the last time it crashed when I did that. I tried doing 2 slashes like I used to do when I took the Java class, but it doesn't work? So let's see here. So you could do, /*, console.log. Let's do that example. Hello. Or we'll do, so we can see something, document.write. Hello. So you do document.write, and I think this is in the slides. It'll actually append this text to the actual HTML document. So what was it if we did the 2 slashes, right? Yeah. You might have done the forward slash. Yeah. Yeah, if you do the forward slashes, if you do the forward slash, what it actually, forward slash, just a pro tip here is like, usually it's an escape character. So, for example, if you want to do like new line, you do /n, hello, right? Or it probably doesn't do, what if we did /t? No. You know what we can do? Because we do // boom. And that should put so if you notice there, the single comment to say that it's a string. So if we wanted to put a single quote into our string, which here I'll do another one here so you can see it a little better, I think. No. Oh. And I got to do that. There we go. So you can see here, so like to insert, say, that single comment there, you can put a / and then the single quote, and then it will go and put the actual quote character into our string here. I think Java does. Most languages do a similar thing too, where you just it's called escaping. So you're escaping the telling the interpreter to consider this to be the actual character code instead of interpreting it as like syntax for the text. If that makes sense, that we're typing in. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Uh huh. Uh huh. What was it? Oh, the exclamation point. Okay. Like in the JavaScript text here, like say body. Uh huh. Uh huh. Uh huh. Oh, I see. I see. In JavaScript. Oh, I see. Yeah. So I think so you did an HTML comment. Yeah. So that's a little different. Yeah, from the because HTML we look like let's throw up some HTML here in comparison, right? HTML is it's more like a data type. It's like an XML type of format. So like everything's by tags, right? Whereas JavaScript and so the HTML code's like it's almost like layout. Like it's like how the document is going to be, I guess, structured, like how the data will be structured on the page. CSS will be your layout and your how the HTML elements will look, and then JavaScript will be the actual code that. Yeah, so HTML has a different commenting. I think we had talked about it. Yeah, the one. Yeah. Yeah. So this is all we're going to see today is just straight up. So we're just doing this tab today here, this JS tab. That's all. So everything that we talk about today would be going in here, which we haven't used, I don't believe, at all really for this class. No, you don't. You know, I figured I'd talk about it just because, like I said, I feel like a web class is not complete without at least a discussion on this. For your final project, if you do elect to use one of these frameworks that we had talked about, like Bootstrap or Foundation or any other type of framework, it's going to be helpful to know this because you'll be able to do things like have little pop-ups appear and do different things with it. Like, so for example, like say like on a form, right, you have a checkbox. You can have it where when you check the box on the page, a section of the page will, let's say, appear, like say like conditional form where like, or you answer, say you have a drop-down box that says, you know, do you plan on traveling to somewhere, right? You say yes, no. So if you say yes, you can have like a whole another area of the page appear for the person to go and fill out the form, right? And usually you use like JavaScript to do that. The search bar, yep, it'll do this. It'll do that as well. So the search bar, yeah, as you're typing, I think God bless you. That's I think called like autocomplete, and as you type, the JavaScript code will you can use. I think we talked about it in the slides here. Events. So you have events that can happen as well. So like say for example like a click, like if I click on something, that's considered an event. If I press the key on the keyboard, that's considered an event. And what will happen is you'll have JavaScript code that listens for an event. How many people have done event-based programming, like in Java or anything? So it's the same way, right? Like if you I'm just usually when you do event-based, it's usually like with GUIs. So like usually you write a routine that's only going to execute when something particular happens. Yeah, that would be considered an event. Yeah. So yeah, if the user puts in certain sequence of, let's say, input, right, that'll trigger this your code to run and perform some sort of task. So the event triggers the function, which then runs code and then does the. So that's like event programming. You're really it's nothing really happens until the user does some sort of interaction with your program. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Uh-huh. Oh yes. I forgot to mention that. You can also do. I think did I mention that in my post? Right. You can do groups as well. Just I'll put an announcement out this week. Just to send me who you're going to be working with. Yep, for the groups, and yeah, and then I'll just you'll. It's due, I believe, May 2nd. Is it available yet? I'm not sure if it's may not be available yet. I'll make it available. Yeah, May 2nd, right? Uh huh. Yes. Mhm. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's. I haven't decided yet on that. It's hard for me to comment on that, right? I have to think about that. I want to say, yeah, subjectively, I most likely would. It would be beneficial if you were to be in a group, because I remember the first week of class when we were talking about it, a lot of people, they wanted to like make their own website and whatnot, or set of web pages. So I wanted to give people the option of doing that, but of course, it's going to be harder going it alone versus with a group, which was what I was trying to convey that day. But yeah, I will take that into consideration during grading. I just haven't fully decided yet. If you could, yeah, I would recommend being in a group. But if not, yeah, if you're doing it solo, I'll take that into consideration. That because it is 3 pages, you're doing pretty much all the pages yourself. Somebody did a group. I don't think I'm allowing more than 3 people in a group, so that would mean each person essentially does a page in concert with one another. That's another thing to be aware of too when you're working together. Make sure that everything is consistent. You have a consistent. Like I don't want to, when I open up the 3 pages, it's just 3 completely different styles, and yeah. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So I guess the answer is yeah. I'm going to probably grade, equally amongst all of them. But yeah, so there's pros and cons working with groups. So yeah, you have the option of working with a group, no more than 3 in a group, or doing it alone. And yeah. To do the project, the 3 pages, it's to do one assignment. So if it like the last assignment, I guess took about 4 hours. I guess if you're doing 3 pages, I was gonna say it shouldn't be more than 15. I would think. If we're saying that was or 12 hours, 12 to 15 hours. I would think we're going to put like a number on it. What's that? Is that an exam? Really? All right, that's something. That's some. I mean, when we have the survey, I don't know if the surveys. I'm sure the surveys must go out soon because I guess we have another month left, right? A semester, a month and a half. Put that in the survey, and I'll, for the next. I'm unfortunately wouldn't be able to have it for this class, but yeah, I'll take that into consideration. Because yeah, it's if some people they prefer, because the other thing too with like a test, I don't know, it depends on the person, I guess. Like a test, you're sitting right there, sweating bullets, memorizing certain things and whatnot, and your time is going to be much more. You wouldn't have the option of picking up and choosing when to work on it. You have like a specific time to do it all in. But yeah, no, put that in the survey, and I'll consider it for future classes. That's interesting. Like, so if you were to take a test, what type of test would it be? Like open-ended, like where you're writing code, I'm assuming too. Uh-huh. Okay. Oh, okay. All right. The final project. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have it doesn't have to look like, I'm not expecting this thing to look like like an Amazon.com or something, or like I understand this is an introductory class, and it's not going to be perfect, but I think that's why too it's labeled medium fidelity. So it's just, but don't sweat bullets thinking, oh, this thing's got to be, because you can spend hours upon hours just perfecting web pages in this manner. But yeah, just as long as you got a basic layout, good layout, and everything's consistent, it should be fine. Oh, a search results page for what, using JavaScript or just? Oh, for the search result. Well, it doesn't have to actually. That like the actual result, like have it where it actually creates the results. You mean? Like, yeah, like this, the actual search results. It's a mock-up. It's really like a static. It's a static page. No, yeah. There's no code that's going to be running. Yeah, no, I'm sorry for the confusion there. Yeah, so it's just a static page with just sample result. Essentially, yep, it'd be like a wireframe, but with the actual HTML code in it, and hopefully we'll see. We'll see which is easier to do. Most likely the HTML coding, I think, a lot of times is the easiest, or versus doing a composite, right, like we had talked about. But yeah, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, there's no. Yeah, don't sweat having to have like a site actually, like doing like searching and having it do. Like I said, like today when I'm talking about the JavaScript stuff, this is just for your benefit if you do elect to go the extra mile and say have it where your page you click on say an item on the search results, and like a little window pops up with additional information. Just want to give you at least the tools to, if you do elect to do it, be able to do it. Any other questions on that? No? Okay. Yeah, no, I'll have that available for this week. Yeah, I have to actually change the wording on it because I think the way it's worded now, it's like to improve the Internet Archive site or something. That's just, it's really. Oh yeah, no, yeah, no. That's something you probably do, like an advanced CS class or something, or advanced, I don't know, maybe even advanced web design. because you would need to know like server-side code and whatnot, so you'd have to know something like Java. You could do it in. I think they have something like Java server or what is it called? JSPs. I forget what it stands for again. But yeah, you'd have to know some sort of back-end server technology to even begin to do that stuff, which we haven't. This is just straight up front-end development we've been going over. So, okay, good. I'm glad we got some relief there for that. But anyway, yeah, if there's nothing else, we'll just continue with this here. So we went over the document, right, comments, play from current slide. So yeah, generally, rule of thumb, just like everything else, comments used to explain, if like in your other programming classes, complicated code, you don't have to comment everything. And when you do comment and update, when you update your code, also remember to update your comments as well. So there's a few ways you can actually go and have things pop up. So you can do the alert, so the alert would just do, let's do it in here since we got it up. So if we did alert, hello. So what that does is it gives you this pop-up with whatever's inside of your alert function here. So also it's dynamic too. So if we were to do like, so this is kind of annoying. That's why alerts, a lot of people don't really use alerts. They usually use like console logging, which I'll show in a second. So if we said var I equals 3, I'll show you var j equals 2. And if you notice, I'm not putting semicolons at the end. And we say I plus j gives us 5. Yep. So another way you can have stuff show up, we went over this, we could do document write. So if we did document dot write I plus j, so yeah, you can see it at the bottom there. It actually writes it out to the HTML output. And then another thing you can do is console.log. So console log, instead of it going to the output, the HTML output, in your developer window. So here we have JavaScript console. So you can see, we had a bunch of errors here, but we also have the console log, which happened down here. So it actually outputs the. So if we run that again, so it just updated it. If you notice in the bottom there of our console window, and in Chrome Developer Tools, this would also show up as a in a window similar to this. So that's console log, and then this essentially was what we just did in the code pen. So you have JavaScript variables. If you notice the way I was declaring variables before, I was saying I started it with the var. And have you gone over like scope when you did your Java class or any of your? What is that? You forget what scope is? So scope is when you declare a variable, like, so for example, let's say you had a variable I, right? And you have it, you could have, I guess, well, Java, I don't know if it allows this. So you can have, like, say, a class that has a property I, right? Like, or variable I declared within a class, and then within a function, say you have, well, let's say the whole thing's within a function. So if you had a variable I defined at the beginning of your function, and then later on you had a loop, right, and you declared I equals something, right, usually in your loop. So the scope would be, it would actually, that variable I in the loop would have a different scope than the previous I you had declared at the beginning of the function. So it's like, it's literally two different variables. And once the loop is done, that I loses scope and then reverts back to the.
You just put the bracket. And
then,
first you define it. If you're doing it as a fill variable, then it's like for the whole thing. But if you're doing it inside of a loop, then it's just found inside of the loop. If you're doing it in another method, you cannot use the same. Even if you use the same I, it's like a different I.
Yep. That's the same. Yep, that's essentially scope there. JavaScript, it allows global variables, which I don't believe Java allows global variables. Correct? I think everything's like a class object. I believe, right? Everything's got to think. Even when you initialize, like when you start a main function, the main function's a class. So this is similar to like C or C++. Like C and C++, you could have global variables that you declare in your program. And what will happen is when you go to like, so you say you declare I, right, at the top of your program in like a language that allows global variables, you can overwrite the global variable inside of your function. It doesn't recognize the scope. Which is what can happen in JavaScript. So in JavaScript, when you declare a variable var, say var y equals 2, it's going to adhere to the scope rules of what we were just talking about. When you're outside of a function or within a loop, you'll lose scope on the variable if you happen to have the same variable name. But if you don't declare with the var, it's going to assume that it's a global variable and just overwrite whatever you have, whatever that was set in that variable, and not care about what the scope was of it. Does that make sense? So that's the one thing and it's a common mistake too. Sometimes, because sometimes when you're writing out code, you forget to put in, say, the var and don't even think about it, but what can happen is, you essentially overwrite something that you believe to not be affected, and it'll cause unexpected behavior later on. So don't forget the var. Var is an important keyword to use when declaring variables, and it prevents overwriting of values. So variables in JavaScript are case sensitive. So common naming conventions are to have variables start with lowercase. The $sign, usually you have things start with a $sign when it's a jQuery object, which hopefully we'll get to by the end of the class. Or you can start with the underscore. Usually when you have something with an underscore, most languages, like Python, for example, if you have something start with an underscore, it's like it's telling you, oh, this is like a private method, but because the language doesn't support creating private, fields or methods, we use the underscore to like kind of, give a signal that this really shouldn't be used outside of the class object. So these are some reserved keywords: case, catch, for, let. Private, I think private, that must be new. That must be in like EC6 or something. I think like the super new, not all browsers support the newest version of the JavaScript runtime. So I think the newest version, you actually declare like classes and whatnot, and I guess the private keyword may be available as well. So These are some common JavaScript variable types that you have. You have strings, which store a series of characters, and you either define a string using the double quotes or the single quotes. Either way doesn't really matter. Some people, I see what will happen is like that example we have with the single quote, where we wanted to have a single quote inside of the string. Sometimes people will do double quote and then put a single quote in the string so that they don't have to do the slash, the escape character sequence for it. You also have numbers, so you can have numbers with or without decimals. So you can have whole numbers or decimal numbers, and at runtime it will determine the type based on so for example, like here, like this will be a integer at runtime, and then this will be like a float or a decimal type. Not sure what the exact phrase of it is, but what's that? Or double, I'm sorry. Well, you have double, float, decimal. I believe decimal is like a new one now in some languages, where like you can specify the actual how many the precision after the decimal place. With JavaScript, I think it's really just like a float or a double, whatever I don't know if there's a decimal or not. You also have Boolean, which is true, false. Special types. Oh, so you also have like instances where you have empty or null variables. So, for example, in this example here, we have this. If you had a cars variable, var cars, you just declared it, but you didn't set it to anything. This is something to know. In the language, it gives it a type. It considers the value to be undefined, versus if you were to, it's not going to be considered null, it'll be considered undefined. But you can also, there's also a way to set things to empty, which is by declaring, there's a special null keyword, which is, essentially empty. It's an empty value that's kept inside of the variable. So that's an odd, it's one thing to keep in mind. There's two types of, usually if you check for, I believe if you check for null, it'll also check for, I think it'll be considered the same as undefined when you do like your comparisons, but that I'll have to double check on. But just be aware that there's undefined and null. They're two separate types. So I think we already did something like this. So here we have string concatenation, right? So we declared a name, and then within here we did an alert and concatenated this string with that string, and it would produce my name is, and then Adam in this example here. I think I don't have to go over that. I think we're all aware of, right, string concatenation. These are the operators that you have: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and modulus. What does modulus do? That's right. Gives you the remainder. This is good, so everybody does know. So obviously, just like in other languages, variables can store all sorts of different types of expressions. You have increment and decrement, which is usually use these in like loops and whatnot. So like in a loop, you usually have like I equals 0, and then the condition to break the loop, I less than, say, something, length of some array, and then your how much to increment by. Usually you just do something like I plus plus, which is it'll just increment the I plus 1, right? So you have increment and decrement in the language. And then, so these are the comparisons. So one of the comparisons that some people usually aren't aware of is the triple equal. And so what the triple equal does is, because of the way it will unbox variables, so I think we had talked about before, like, when we declare variables, right, we're not specifying the type, right? We're not specifying that this is an integer explicitly, right? We're not saying this is a string, this is a Boolean. We're just putting values in and not caring what the variable type is. You know, we just care about just giving it a name and storing something within it and worrying about the type later. So what will happen is when it does comparisons, like say the equal equals, like say we had, so for example, let's go to our pen here and do the document right. And let's do this here. So if we were to say J was 6, right? And actually, let's do 3, right? And we say, we do the operator I equals J, right? It's coming back with true, right? But what do we have here? We have, it's comparing a integer, right, with a string and returning the statement that this is true. So it's taking, it'll attempt to take a, it'll cast, it does like a typecast. So for the J there, it's typecasting it to the, and it probably is doing a cast for the 3 there. It's either casting 3 to be a string, or it's casting J to be an integer 3, and then doing the comparison. So it's going to attempt to do it's going to try to take apples and oranges and make it an apples and apples comparison. So what the triple equal does is, so if we were to add the third equal sign in, now what it's doing is saying it's giving false. And why is it giving false? Because the type, right? Yeah. So the type, so it throws that extra type check in on you so that you can check to see if they are both the same type, and if they're not the same type, it's going to give you that false right away. If it is the same type, then it'll continue and do its normal comparison. So that's what the triple equals does. And a lot of people will be sticklers and say, oh, you know, you should always use the triple equals and da-da-da. But, I mean, honestly, that is one of the advantages for these types of languages, to have this loosely typed system like this. It really depends on the application that you're working on, if it's something that you need to strictly check. I mean, you may have to strictly check it. When would be a good example of when you would have to strictly check the 2 types when doing a comparison, or even doesn't even have to be an equals equals. You can also do, like, say, a less than or greater than type of thing. When would be a good example that you would need to not only check the actual the comparison, but also to ensure that to check the type as well between the 2 variables that you're doing the the comparison against.
Okay. And case sensitive and like protecting the password
Uh-huh.
Can you define if they're the same, but also maybe the case sensitive?
That's close. That you use regex for that. Which have you ever gone over regex in your other classes? Regex, it does it pretty much does what you were just talking about, and I'm not going to cover it today because there's a lot. Regex get tricky, but that's close. Yeah, no, I mean that's a good example. Did you have what was?
That was a good one, but I was gonna say, I guess like if you're taking like an online quiz and like the testing and like the answers correct,
Uh-huh.
like you need to compare.
Oh, the types. If the answer, what do you mean, like?
I guess like if you put in like, I don't know, it's like a math quiz online.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so where precision matters,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, that's a good example. So like for example, right, if they put in like say 3.25, right, but you're comparing it to, so you have a float compared to an integer, right, and you want it to be, so, precision mattered for it, so you want it to be, the decimal version of it. That's a good example because you'd want it to return false, saying, oh, this is an integer, not a decimal type, to compare against. That's a good example, right there. Yeah, with the math quiz. I'm sorry, Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, if you're comparing, yeah, negative, positive. Okay, good. So that's the triple equals. So now you know. There's one thing you get out of this lecture, it's the triple equal sign. Because yeah, a lot of people get tripped up on that. I think it's really, I don't know any other language that does that. So this was the equality. So this is the strict equality here that we just went over. So you also have your logical operators and or not, right? And I mean that works just as you would expect it to work in your other programming languages. So JavaScript arrays. So you have arrays. They're a list of variables. Any questions so far? I'm sorry. Am I going too fast? Go ahead. Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah, you can. So yeah, you can access the array indexes. Via the way you were just talking about, right? So if you were to, so what was the example? It was if you wanted to. So if we had names, right? We'll do Henry. I don't know. I'm just making up stuff. John, Ryan, Nick, right? And then 4 equals 0, names dot length, or I less than names dot length, and semicolon, I plus plus. And we'll just print the names out. So we'll say document dot write names I. This is just to give us some output, and then we'll put a new line in. So we just printed out our names there, and then you wanted to do like an order, right? Yeah, it's so you can do a lot. Yeah, just like Java, it's I think it's Turing complete, so you can pretty much whatever you can think of. Eventually, I don't know how far along you are with your programming studying, but I mean eventually what you'll find is all the languages that you learn, they're very similar in terms of structure and what the capabilities of what they do. Some of them have, more features than others. For example, like Python. Well, I'm sure in this one there's built-in functions that you can call that will actually sort. So, like, for example, I think, let's see if this one does this. If you do something like names, sort. Does it sort it? So right there, I believe, yep, it sorted it in order there, right? So, like, the actual array has a sort function that you can call on it, because the way we had defined it here was Henry, John, Brian. And if we look here, it's Brian, Henry, John, Nick when we went to print it out. So yeah, it's just like Java, and you can do a lot of stuff in it. You can have your own functions and stuff, which we'll get to in a minute. But yeah, you have loops, you have branching statements like if else, you have case statements. The other weird thing with JavaScript is initially when it was created, there's no way to define classes. You have what are called prototypes. Every object in JavaScript is considered a function. Every instance of anything in JavaScript is considered an object. So functions are also considered objects. So when you define a function, it's actually an object that you can store in a variable and all sorts of crazy stuff. But yeah, it's like Java. Yeah, you have a lot of options on things you can do. Does that answer your question? Okay, good. So arrays are a list of variables. They're written with square brackets, as we saw. And as we saw, too, in the example we just did, arrays have a length property and also other properties and functions, like also that sort function we saw, because they're technically an object in the interpreter, and you can perform all sorts of things on it. So, to get the length of the array here, you can call the .length property, and it will return back the number of elements in the array, so that then you can use it to do something like looping through an array, or at least determining what your bounds are. And then and I think we saw that in our prior example too. So to access an item in an array, you can use this index here. Array access is zero base, so to access the first element, just like in most languages, you start with 0. And so we kind of just did an exercise here. Change, add items in a list. So just like in most other languages, you can just access the array element by the index, change the actual value, and then it will go and update that value in the original array. There's also, like we saw before, there was functions that you can that are built into arrays. So it also has, for example, the push function. So you can have arrays behave in manners like stacks or queues. Have you guys gone over stacks, queues, and other types of data structures? So it's a lot of that's built into here, so you can actually use arrays to act as a stack or a queue for if you had to implement something like that. It's already built in for you. You also have, and I don't know if we talk about it in here, but you also have what are technically like hash tables, or they call them, I believe, key value arrays in JavaScript. So you can have, instead of it being going by the index number, you can have it go by a name, which I think it gets to. So it'd be, I'll show you in like a later example here how that works. So you have if statements, which I think most of you have seen, which gives you branching possibilities here. If else, which is this redundant for a lot of people? Right here, going over this stuff. Yeah, we're almost done here. So I'll just skip over this example. So I would like to go on to the jQuery stuff. We talked about. Was that? Oh yeah, I'll post this online tomorrow morning. There's actually two of these. There's one PowerPoint that's just on the JavaScript syntax, and then the second PowerPoint is on jQuery. So we did the for statement. We iterated over an array, which we just did in this example here. And then we also have functions. So functions are a way of just having a routine we can just call by name. And so the way that functions work is, so this is like that, what I was talking about before, functions are technically objects. So in this example here, we have a print list function, right, or a print list variable that is equal to what this is called an anonymous function because it's not, it's not in the normal syntax of, declaring function and then giving a function name with the parameters that it will take. This is an anonymous function, so you just start it off with function and then the parameters and then just go into your actual code block here. So if we were to implement, so if we go back to our original example here, what did we call that? Print list, bar, print list equals function, and change this to this. And we go down here, and we just say print list names, and then so then we can, so that's one form of doing that. You can also have this be, instead of it being in this syntax, I think the normal way you would see it is like function print, we'll call it print list2 lists, and essentially we'll copy and paste this code in. And do that. And you can see it's still, so that's the two forms that you have. You can have you can either declare a variable, have the anonymous function, and then throw your function block in there, or you can just do the old school way of just declaring your function with the function name and then putting in your block of code there. The reason why they have this, I believe, is for the event programming. It's just easier if everything is, so like for here, when you have your properties for stuff, it's easier to have your events be tied, in this way, when you go to define, say, like click events or your different event types, key press events and whatnot, having it tied to this format here than if you were to just declare a function with the function name and everything. So, yeah, there's little arrows pointing to stuff. So it's pointing to the semicolons and the code block there. So, yeah, declaring a function is different from a statement. Code in a function will not be run until you explicitly call it, which I think we all know about. And then, yeah, there was that. So we just did that example, our code pen there, where we called the print list. We talked about scope, right? Any questions Any more questions about scope? No? Okay. And then JavaScript objects. So objects, that's what are considered like the key value types of arrays. Some languages call them dictionaries. So this is an example of an object, or like another language, like Python, for example. This would be known as like a dictionary. I think I think Java or other strongly typed languages, they may call these hash tables because you're essentially like, you have this unique name that you have that you're able to just instantly access, by just calling the name in there. So that's what the key value. And if you look too, this is interesting here. So like in this JS object here, you can also, as a value, put in a function. So like in this example here. So let's actually copy this code here. Oops. But you just take my word for it. So like like in this example here, if you can call car.accelerate, and it will go and essentially take the acceleration. What is it doing here? I think this is incorrect here. This probably should be this dot acceleration. We'll add the 10 to here, so that's a bug there. But yeah, there's also a this keyword. So the this keyword is going to reference whatever the parent object is for the inside of the code block here. So this refers to the actual car variable, which has these properties in it. Does that make sense? Yeah. So yeah, the this keyword. I think Java has this as well, right? The this keyword for when you declare classes, right? So yeah, the this keyword just refers to itself. And some examples there. Then you also have do while loops, inheritance, the newer ES6 syntax, and that was about it for script syntax. Any questions on that? No. I got one more slide on jQuery. jQuery is like the most popular JavaScript library out there. What jQuery does, it lets you manipulate the DOM, the document object model, the actual HTML, a lot easier than using straight up JavaScript. Because when we were doing our JavaScript before, right, to like write out to the output, we had to do this document.write, which is just shooting the text out to whatever is in the whatever is appended. It's essentially appending text to the HTML document. Most times we don't want to just append text to the document. We want to probably add it into a specific tag that we had in mind or a section of the HTML structure, and jQuery helps us do that by giving these easy to use methods in the library. So yeah, its main purpose to make common tasks in JavaScript easier and shorter. It's used in 80% of the top websites in the world. So if you see, have any of you seen this? You might have seen this when you did the report assignment where you had have you seen like the $sign, right? So the $sign is essentially that's initializing the jQuery library. So you can either have, commonly it's the dollar sign and then some sort of string within it, or you'll see the actual, it'll be jQuery and then whatever stuff is written inside. But a lot of times it'll be the dollar sign. So here's an example here. We have the dollar sign, dot, caption, dash, text. Now what does that look like there? Does this look familiar? We've seen something that starts with a dot in our classes, right? So that's a class class name that's put in there. So what this is saying is, for all class names, for all tags that have this class name, change the text or set the text to be magic. And then what it'll do is every class. So let's look at this example here. Hopefully this example works. So here we have caption text, and here is our class right here. And if I were to take out, or if I were to change this, right, it sets it, it's now set back to what the original text was, because it's a different class name. So that's so you have these like selectors, is like the CSS selectors that we talked about. You can use these in jQuery to do all sorts of stuff. So this is like, so the other thing to keep in mind too, this is going to apply for all tags that have that caption text within it. And then you can also chain as well, so you can not only do caption text and then change the text to magic, you can also change, say, the CSS background to, say, something like orange. So you can do so that's called chaining, where you have multiple functions running within it. So here's an exercise you can do you can do on your own. So here's an example where you have a button click event. Whoops. So here in jQuery, we have this selector selecting the button, alert button class, and then it's applying this click event here. So the click event takes a function, anonymous function argument, which is put inside here. And then essentially what that's saying is, when you click on this element, it's going to run this code here, which is doing the alert, which is a lot cleaner than what we were doing before, where when the browser loads, it just runs the code. This code is only going to execute when I actually perform the event. So in this case, I clicked that object there, which triggered the event, and then triggered the alert to show up. So that's a lot. I mean, that's probably use this like 90% of the time when you do alerts. Use this click function here. Any questions on that? No. You can also grab values as well. So, so in this example here, we're going to, you see how easy it is here. So this example, if I go and I type in some stuff in this input box here, when I click on, so it's doing a click event. We're setting a click event for this button here, because this button has that click event, that dot button alert class, or that dot alert button class. And then we're setting a variable name equal to this jQuery object name input, which is this input box here, dot value, and then running the alert function to display the value that's inside of the input box here. So now if I click it, we see some stuff. And then if I go and I change this, I put some more stuff. You get the idea. If I click it, it'll just show whatever's in that input box there. So it just makes things a lot easier to like pull in HTML, data from the page, and also have these different events running to do different things. So these are just some basic examples here. And then, so this is manipulating the actual document object model. So in addition to grabbing text, you can also set the CSS styles. You can set the actual HTML structure. So like say this was a list, you could say like add additional items to the list by modifying the HTML. You can show or hide, like we were talking about that example before. If you were to check a checkbox or select a specific input or selector from an input, you can have, like, say, certain sections show and hide depending on, if we say it was a dynamic form or something. jQuery is a massive library. There's over 300 functions. Many different versions of it. Just be aware of the version that you're working on. And I don't know if we're just about at time here. I'll post up an article about Ajax. Has anybody ever heard of Ajax before? So Ajax does essentially what Ajax is doing is in your JavaScript code, it's connecting to the web server and pulling in data, loading it into your web page. That's pretty much what Ajax is doing. And that was pretty much it. Any questions? No, I went through that really quick today, but I figured just give you a crash course, just if anything, hopefully everyone learned the triple equals, the triple equal sign. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.